Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/Wisdom of the Sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center, New York, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show, and welcome to Sunday. It's Interview Sunday. On Sunday, we pick out interesting people. We got an interesting guy here. He was on our walk on Wednesday, and we decided to make a whole show about this guy because he's got a new film out. Please welcome Ravinol Chambers. How are you, Prabhu? Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here again, to see you all.
Sounds like you need a little applause button.
I need one of those soundtrack buttons. Yeah. Applause, laughter, gong, various sound effects. Well, welcome to the show. He's a filmmaker and he's a bhakta, and what we really love is seeing people engaging what they do best in a spiritual way. And I really think you hit the nail on the head. The film is called, I'm going to forget the film.
Road to Vrindavan.
Road to Vrindavan, which is a great name, but it's more than a spiritual journey. You're making, you're like diving into what went wrong with tradition and what is good with tradition. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that seems like the question that is going on, especially in relationship to women and girls growing up in India. What is right and what is wrong? And I think this is a great springboard. Kaustubha, you want to say anything?
Well, why don't I do the official bio?
Yeah, do the official bio.
Why don't we start there?
Yeah.
But maybe before we go there, we should just give a couple quick announcements, right? Marriage, some stuff happening today.
Yeah, we've got your Bhakti 101 class at 10:30 to 12:30 today.
Right.
And then we also
set up, wasn't it? Maybe you've got some announcements about me.
There's other people teaching too. There's a Bhakti recovery group at 9:30 right after the show. And there's Silas is offering a Yoga Nidra workshop at 6 p.m. today, and Madhu is offering a Bhakti Q&A session at 8 p.m. for Patreon members.
Thanks for covering me there, Mara.
You got it.
Okay. And Mara's going on vacation.
And what's with
that one? That's the latest news.
What's with that?
It's your first vacation ever.
It's
within our, not ever, but within our podcast.
It's going to be weird. It's going to be
weird without Mary.
I might miss the show for a couple days.
Even when she went to,
around.
Where was it that you went? Madagascar or someplace before?
Zanzibar.
Zanzibar. You still tuned in. I think it's just not going to.
You know what happens is when you go to California, that's why we have no Californians on the show.
All right.
It's like that time zone throws everybody off.
All right, Mara.
All right,
come back quick, all right?
Yeah, don't be like, maybe I don't need those guys.
When are you going?
On Wednesday.
And when do you come back?
Monday, the following Monday.
Oh, man.
What?
Now, what about the weekend shows? You going to be with us for those? Those are start later in the... Oh, okay.
Yeah, I will.
All right. Okay, back to Ravanel. Sorry to leave you hanging there. So Ravinol Chambers is an Irish-born film director focusing on stories that cross boundaries and aim to connect us at the deepest level. As a teenager in Dublin, he wanted to be a stockbroker. However, life was to take on a very different journey. After studying for a degree in psychology, he spent most of his 20s as a full-time Krishna monk. It means he was a Hare Krishna. Let's be clear about this.
Krishna monk.
Yes.
Dressed like Krishna?
Living in Ireland, Africa, India, and the UK. And it was in Africa in 1995 that he first developed a passion for capturing authentic stories on camera. In 2009, after completing his MBA, he started the award-winning production company Be Inspired Films. Be Inspired Films has recently released Road to Vrindavan. It's Ravinol's debut feature documentary. Let me just start off, Ravi, by saying, and as Raghu was saying, that I think this Be Inspired Films is a great thing. I think it's a great example of, as he mentioned, taking a spiritual background that you cultivated in your 20s, and then taking it into the world and trying to do something wonderful with it. So, thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
What awards have you won, by the way?
Oh, yeah. So in 2015, which is just before we started to win awards, actually, we became one of the UK's first B Corps. So people in America may have heard of B corporations. It's a movement of businesses that are acting as a force for good in the world. Mm-hmm. So you have like Patagonia, Body Shop, Divine Chocolate, Etsy, Ben and Jerry's, these kind of companies who have like not just that they do a little bit of good on the side, but they kind of trying to bake a social mission into their actual business model. Right. And then 2016 through 2020, 5 years in a row, we won the best film company in the UK under 40 staff for the Drum Recommends Awards, which is a global creative agency awards. So yeah, pretty
5
chuffed.
years in a row.
Yeah. And especially the thing that I'm the most proud of, if I'm honest, is it's great to get the awards, but it's that we actually decided at our outset that we were only going to tell stories about social impact, and we've stuck to that. And so that's the best bit for me.
It must be gratifying to serve in a way that you always feel when you go to work in the morning, you feel good about what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So let's talk about Road to Vrindavan. And we brought you on a couple weeks ago onto our Walk on Wednesday. So I don't want to just repeat what we went through there. So let me just kind of fast forward that you, similar to the background that Raghunath and I had, in your 20s, you became a Hare Krishna monk, and you lived in Vrindavan, where we also spent a lot of time. You, since coming out of that, that connection that you have to Vrindavan, and that connection that you had to Bhakti, and obviously the connection that all draws from India, was all connected you to this. It gave you, I think, a certain lens to view this story that you tell through Road to Vrindavan. And you were invited to go on on an interesting tour, kind of a fundraising tour, where you drive these auto rickshaws or tuk-tuks from Mumbai down to the southern tip of India. And that was a kind of like a publicized fundraising
Adventure,
drive, adventure. For a school that's really dear to the hearts of both Raghunath and myself, which is the Sandipani Muni School in Vrindavan, which is it's a girls' school that has about, is it like about 14?
1,400. They have capacity for 3,000, but they've got 1,400 at the minute. Yeah.
Okay, so 1,400 girls, and of course these are girls that come from, I would say, I don't know if all of them, but most of them come from pretty dire poverty situations. But it's a beautiful school, run by a friend of ours, Rupa Raghunath, but that it was somewhere on that tour that you began to develop the inspiration to tell the story that you told in Road to Vrindavan. Is that right?
Yeah, it was just when I got invited on the trip initially, I was just excited about the adventure, to be honest, and visiting the school. But having a film background and having always had the desire to kind of tell a bigger story, like a feature film story in documentary, I thought maybe this could be the opportunity because of the backdrop of traveling across India being so colorful and exciting. But also I felt like with development issues or stories that are from other parts of the world, it's easy to just read what you see in the headlines overseas. And I wanted to actually talk to people on the ground and see what people really felt on the ground.
Okay. And the subject of the film is the lives of girls in India. the lives of of many of the girls in India, and how especially it has to do with the education of young women in India, or the lack of, and how that education gets thwarted in different ways due to tradition. Would you say that's an accurate way to sum it up?
Partly, yeah. It's also poverty, but tradition is
Right.
very mixed in with it. Yeah,
Right.
it's interesting. It may start with certain things, but over time, it just kind of gets baked in, the idea that the boy is more important than the girl.
Well, that to me, that maybe that's where, as I was watching the film, that's where this you begin to understand the nature of the problem, and you hear that. I think the phrase is that, and you're even interviewing. One thing I loved about the film is you didn't really create any villains. You kind of looked at it with a with an even kind of view, and you even see like parents of these girls who appear to be nice people that actually care, but due to poverty, there's an Indian phrase, I forget what it is, but I don't know if it's in Hindi or in Bengali, but that like poverty brings out the worst qualities in one, and so sometimes when you're under that financial pressure, it's so intense that it causes you to make decisions that can be very callous. And so you have parents saying that the reality is, when they're in this circumstance, that when a girl is born, it feels like a liability, right?
A
Or is
burden.
that, was that a
Yeah.
burden? Yeah, a burden.
Yeah.
Whereas when a boy is born, it seems like, oh, we just gained an asset. Could you
The inter-
explain why one would feel that way?
For sure, yeah. So the context where that kind of came out the most was with one of the lead characters is called Rashmi. Rashmi and Anuradha are two girls that are in Vrindavan, and we sort of see their story unfold across the whole film. And Rashmi's father was going to marry her and her younger sister when they were 14 and 12, along with her two older sisters, because it's really expensive to get a girl married, to put on the wedding, to give the dowry, which is a kind of amount of goods or money that is given with the girl when she gets married. And he thought, if I marry them all together, I'm not rich, that will save me, from having to marry them all separately. And so we hear that from him. And yeah, he's just a normal guy. He's not a bad guy at all. But it's also said that when, the boy is the asset, because whatever you invest into him in terms of education, looking after his health, everything else will stay in the family, because he will stay in the family. He'll also continue the family name and the family line. Whereas the girl, whatever, it sounds very callous, but whatever money you put into her, even in terms of food, education, medicine, all of that investment will leave the family through marriage. And anyway, probably because of the way things are, she will never really need to use that education, so it's just a waste of time. So that's kind of one way of looking at it.
And
But
I'm sorry, please go on.
now, the interesting thing about this is that, you see, it would be mistaken to think that that's the whole story, because even here in England, for example, and in America, you'll see Indian families, the same thing happens. So they're not poor anymore. They're super rich, and they're like possibly even going to get an education, but they still celebrate when a boy is born. And many older ladies and people will say to you, if you have a girl, oh, I'm sorry, maybe you'll have a son next time. So it still happens today. Very much so. Very much so.
Go back to when it is primarily an economic issue.
But it somehow it gets baked in. Yeah.
It gets baked in, yeah. But I could feel from, like, say, that father of those four girls, the idea, it's also that these girls, when they are married, they'll enter into other families, whereas the men will stay in that family. And when I grow old, it's not like I'm living off some pension, or I'm living off of, all the savings that I have. I'm going to need someone to care for me.
Yeah.
And the girls are going to be gone. So if I have a son, then I know that in my old age I'm going to be cared for. And if I'm only having girls, they're all going to be gone, and they're going to be a financial burden
And
when
also,
it comes time to marry.
the girls, even if they would want to look after their parents, they have a new responsibility to the parents of the family they've married into, to look after them. So
Right.
so it's a tricky situation. But another question I asked the girls in Vrindavan when we arrived at the school in Vrindavan, it was beautiful. I mean, there was about 20 of us on the original trip, the tuk-tuk trip, and they came and greeted us at the gate, and they did a whole welcome ceremony, a dance, and they threw flower petals from the bridge above. It was just really sweet and heartwarming. And then we went in and they did the whole assembly and everything. And then I sat down with some of these girls, and they're just amazing. Like, they're so full of life, and really they're speaking incredible English, very powerful.
It all comes out in the film.
You see it,
as you interview these girls.
Yeah, and I won't spoil it too much, but they have incredible aspirations, and not just aspirations for themselves, but oftentimes they have aspirations to do stuff that will help the community as well. Right. But I asked these girls, why are the boys the way they are? Because one of the other issues is it's not just, so poverty is one thing, right?
Yeah.
Then there's the fear within Indian society that if my daughter somehow gets mixed up with boys, and that doesn't mean that she actually gets in a relationship, but she may even just be seen talking to a boy, or anything that could be seen to be what she shouldn't be doing, then the reputation of the family, the whole reputation of the family, that weight is on her shoulders. You can never do anything wrong. So if anything happens or seems to happen, the solution, instead of addressing boys' behavior, is basically to just keep the girl in. Well, then it won't happen, right? We'll just keep her in. She won't get educated. She'll just stay in the house, right? But I asked these girls, why do you think the boys are the way they are? And this is kind of a clue as to why it kind of gets baked in. They said, well, if there's food, the boys will always get it first, and they'll always get more. If there's milk, for example, or anything that's seen as a scarcity because they don't have a lot of it, the boy will get it and the girl won't get it, even down to medicine. So you can easily understand, especially as children grow up, you don't even need to say it. They just see it and observe that the boys will think everything's telling me I'm more important. And it's also telling me that girls are not important. Right. So how would you develop, unless you're explicitly teaching them to respect girls, why are they going to respect girls? Nobody else seems to. Right? And so over a period of time, it just becomes the norm.
The film illustrates it really well. And you can understand how, like, for instance, the idea of a dowry or many of the traditional conventions in Indian culture, and these are in cultures all around the world too. It's not only
very much, yeah.
But the film deals with it in India. What was meant to kind of care for women has become it becomes callous when it's misapplied, and so you're a young girl, you're 13 years old, your father and mother have to take whatever opportunity they can to marry you off. You're going to enter into a family and you're going to be stuck in it forever. Once you're married, if you've had any education, it's going to be finished right there. There's no escape. So you may be marrying into a situation where you're not respected, even you're treated cruelly, even abusive, and there's no way out.
Yeah, very much so. Especially because your voice often doesn't count. Like nobody... So, for example, there was a village we went to called Kochergaon, which is outside a place called Nasik in Maharashtra, which is the same sort of county, if you like, that Mumbai is in, but it's much more rural. And there's a bunch of girls there in this village, a couple of hundred girls. Now, the organization that we went and visited that helped us to kind of, connect with these families and girls had done this census of all the girls in that village. And they'd asked them
I'm sorry.
all...
Could you repeat now? How did that census come about? What was the thought behind it?
Yeah, so there's an organization called Abhivyakti Media for Development. It's an organization that tries to look at social issues in ways through, I think they call it action research. So it's very much like by going into communities and training them to do the research themselves. So they did this census with these girls. And they asked them all questions, like they went around door to door and interviewed them, like what are their worries, concerns, fears, safety issues, aspirations, hopes, feelings, all of these things. And the amazing thing was no one had ever asked them any of these things before. And no one probably would have ever. You're just kind of born into a life of duty where you're sort of kind of invisible, and you do your stuff every day, but what you feel and all of these things don't really matter, right? So then with these girls, they then did a smaller group of 35, and they started to realize they all had very similar challenges and similar ideas and feelings and stuff. So they developed this incredible companionship and friendship, and whereas previously they all lived in the village but they didn't really know each other, they were all kind of quite separate, they felt invisible. So the idea is that your voice doesn't count. And if you're not educated, and let's say there is a discussion going on in the family, if you do, no one's going to ask you your opinion, but if you do try to, you'll say, well, how would you know? You're not even educated. What value could your opinion have, right? So this is a really key point, is that education, because sometimes people will say, well, what's the point of just being educated? You're just going to turn into the rat race, especially if people are anti-West, then you're just going to get into all this capitalist idea and it's all an illusion anyway, right? But the point is that when you're in poverty, having more options to have a little bit more income is not a bad thing. But even aside from the economic thing, to be able to have a sense of your own voice, more confidence in yourself, be able to say no to certain things, have more awareness, and be able to take part in conversations and have your ideas shared, that in and of itself is massive, even if you don't go on and work and so on.
Right. There's some real heartbreaking stories told. Could you maybe just share one or two to give us a clear picture?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean,
I want to become thoroughly depressed this morning.
Well, I was
Already
I'll
I'm
ask
like
for the
down in the
hopeful, for the
dumps.
more hopeful ones.
We want to go. Yeah, we're going to turn it.
As well.
Don't worry, everybody. We're going to turn this up. There's a positive spin on all of this, but we have to get to the dark.
Yes,
first.
someone described it as heartbreaking yet incredibly hopeful. So there's both. There's both. But the first part of Anuradha's story is quite, heartbreaking. I mean, Anuradha is probably the biggest hero in the film.
Yeah.
I mean, by the end, you see her, she's just incredible. And she's supporting so many of the girls in her whole area. Like, so she's a teacher in the school, but she's also teaching the kids on the roof in the evenings. And she's just amazing. But her story begins, she was 13 and her father told her in 15 days, you're going to get married. And you can see in her character as it develops later, she has so much life and potential. And she was just devastated. And the day before the wedding, she locked herself in her room. And I'm not going to give it away exactly what happened, but she did something basically that was quite drastic, but enabled her to then avoid the wedding. Mm-hmm. And then later on in the film, we see how, her life kind of develops in such a great way. But that was very, very tough for her. Another story that's quite heartbreaking, yet hopeful at the same time, was Manisha. In that village where I mentioned they all kind of did became a group, yeah. She was an incredible actress. So the girls, when we were there, they did this drama for the entire village in the village square, and there was hundreds of people there. And normally you have to try and understand, like, girls are kind of, a bit more invisible. So they're right up there on the stage. The whole drama is all these girls, and they're sharing in the drama the challenges they go through, the kind of, it's quite comedic as well. People were laughing, like the kind of things that people say, and all the kind of ironies of the society, but also that some of the girls kill themselves because they can't deal with the things, or because they have these pressures, but they don't have a place to discuss it, especially in the family. It's just not talked about. So she is, very successful, if you like, in the context of this. But we went to have lunch with her parents before we left. And they were both, beautiful people. And they said that they're super proud of her. And in that community, they're pretty progressive, like they were supporting her and everything. And then one of my colleagues, my producer, Ravan, who's an actor, he said, she really loves acting. Would you consider her being an actress? And they said no. And then we said, well, why not? And they said, well, in our community, that would be seen in a very derogatory way. They would, because of historical kind of ideas of women dancing or acting, they'd see it as part of maybe it's the Bollywood thing, or the Dave Dassi, courtesans of
somehow
the king
undignified.
Yeah, it's somehow seen as sending her to dance. It's like something like that. And then I said to the mom, I said, but do you not think that you would feel regret maybe later in life if you don't, encourage her in that way? And she said, broke my heart. She said, I already feel tremendous regret.
Yeah.
But what can I do? The community will always win. And this is the interesting thing. When you say the community, what's that really mean? It's like even in any country around the world, right? This is sort of an invisible structure, a power, a grip. It's not just one person. It's kind of like something else. It's kind of the collective norms, the tradition, the culture, whatever it is. And some people could say it's kind of like a system, right?
Yeah.
and it has a very strong grip. Yeah.
I remember at one point in the film you were interviewing this woman who used to be a professional tennis player in India.
Yeah.
And was it her? I think it was her that said, you know, there are these aunties in the
Yeah,
that they you know, they're kind of prominent socially, you know,
yeah.
and they do their gossiping, but it's you know, anything that kind of goes a little bit outside the boundaries of what's considered the norm, there's this condemnation of it, and it must be painful for people to endure that somehow.
Yeah,
it has some powerful influence.
The funny thing is that obviously in Indian culture, if you say it to any, especially Indian women, they will just instantly know what you mean. You know, it's such a common thing. And it's often not about their own daughters, it's about other people's daughters. But obviously then other people are doing it about their daughters. And it kind of, the interesting thing about that is we saw in the film as well that when people talk about the patriarchal systems, that doesn't mean men. You know, it can mean it's a system, right? But it can be endorsed and supported and held in place by men. It can also be endorsed and supported and held in place by women. And often women are the culture carriers. So, and also often in any society, you do behavior, don't you, that gets appreciated.
Right.
So if you're appreciated for keeping it in place as a woman, then often that's what happens. And we see that in the night school, where the kids who have no chance to get educated in the daytime, so they get educated at nighttime because they're working on the farm. Yeah. This lady comes and pulls her away to do more work on the farm at 9 p.m. at night. And so it's often the case. But I have a friend, Lisa Harding, who's a kind of really successful writer in Ireland, where I'm from. And she watched the film. And she told me the same thing happens in Ireland. She said that, and often with her generation, it's even the girls' own mothers who are kind of envious or bitter of what's possible for the girls. So I think that's a very interesting thing that happens in the film, is it's talked about, is that it tends to swing one way or the other way. Either this happened to me and it was hard, and therefore I never want it to happen to you, or this happened to me and it was hard, and so why shouldn't you have to go through it as well? That's just the way it is, right? And
I also saw that same thing playing out in really tragic ways in the film, where if a girl is, say, raped or sexually harassed, is being sexually harassed in some way, which is not uncommon, that if this girl, if it happened in the context of her trying to become educated, trying to find a way out of this difficult cycle, even she's been given a little leniency to do that. If anything goes wrong which is no fault of the girl, it's seen as, oh, well, you see, this is the result of your trying to step outside of the tradition, so let's shut that down. And as the girl goes older, actually her possibilities just get narrower and more narrow, whereas the boys, as they're growing older, their possibilities are expanding.
Exactly. And the interesting thing about that is you know, in a very fearful kind of way, you could understand how that's a decision someone might make. How do we solve this fear? Keep her indoors. But the other side of that is that, you know, and it may not be obvious immediately to them how to do it, but like maybe we can do better, you know, as a society. And also, this is the fascinating part where the whole film takes a big twist, is that, so that first trip on the tuk-tuks was, you know, just speaking to various people, getting a sense of the issue. But actually a lot of the richer stories that we go back and see happened on a second trip. And the in-between bit was where somebody criticized me and said, why are you making this film as a man? And that kind of made me really, it was a blessing. It was a horrible experience at the time, because I was like, what? But it made me dig deep and go, well, surely there is a role for us, whoever we are in society, especially if, you know, the men are the decision makers in their families. And that's when that lady Shika in New York, I interviewed her in Central Park. She said to me that you can educate a girl you can empower her into isolation, because if you open up her dreams and her eyes and her possibilities, but the people in her community have not changed their mindset, like those aunties or the men or the brothers or the fathers, then in a way she's almost worse off. And so it is I'm not sure why it's so uncomfortable when people talk about men needing to change,
Right.
but people don't like to talk about it. And so we looked at the role of men in this as well, and how they can also help as part of the change. And also, I kind of undergo a transformation in the film myself as to kind of like, through that whole process. And, even in my own marriage with my own wife.
Right, that plays out in the film as well. And one woman that you spoke to used a metaphor of, you can educate a girl and she can become a butterfly, but unless the rest of society moves forward, at the same rate, then she'll just become caught up in this web and unable to fly. Right.
Yeah, she's stuck in the net of society. Yeah.
Okay, but as I mentioned earlier, the one of the real beautiful parts and really part of the origin of the film is this school in Vrindavan, the Sandipani Muni School. And Raghunath, you've brought your when you take pilgrimages to Vrindavan, it's always a place where you bring people.
He's sort of like Rupa Raghunath, the founder of it, is sort of like one of us. He did time as monk in the Krishna movement, and he started one of his. He's Italian, and he started serving the widows. It's a big thing in India, especially in these holy cities. The widows have their own ashrams. The husbands have died, so the women get together in these ashrams, but they're very poor and they're very simple, and they're actually. It's quite beautiful to see these women. They go on pilgrimage every day. To me, when I see it, it actually looks like this is how I want to retire. I want to retire in Vrindavan, in these ashrams with all these like-minded people. But they're very poor, and so Rupa used to have these. He would feed them on a regular basis.
Yeah,
he would make lunch for them every day, and it started getting so big that it almost like grew bigger than the ashram itself that he was living in. So he had to start outside, and he would go back to the West and collect money, and people would contribute. Wealthy people from the West would contribute towards it, and he would enlarge the program until he got a bigger place outside the temple, and he started doing it on his own. And then one day he decided, there's so many kids on the street panhandling. I wonder if they would go to school. And he started a 50-room schoolhouse, or 50-student schoolhouse, not 50 rooms, 50 kids, and just said, let's see if it would work. And it was packed immediately, and the kids loved it. And from there, it just started growing and growing and growing. Now he's got two big K through 12 schools. He's got organic farms, soy milk factories, a restaurant. It's quite impressive to see what one person focused can create.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So maybe you can share some of the more encouraging stories that grew out of the Sandipani Muni School in Vrindavan.
Yeah, sure. So there's a group of 4 or 5 girls that I sat down with, and they were sharing that one of them wanted to become a police officer so that she could arrest people who were forcing, young girls to get married. Another one said she wanted to become an astronaut to touch the sky, so the girl could touch the sky. Another one, I think, wanted to become, I'm not sure if one of them said they wanted to become the president of India.
Shoot high.
But they have real belief, and so that's the thing. It's not just education as in just academics. They get an incredibly rounded education. Actually, they do kind of all kinds of sports, martial arts. They do arts and crafts. They do drama. They do debating. So it's more than just education. It's kind of like life skills as well. Incredible.
It's an impressive school.
Very impressive.
Whenever I go there, I'm like, I want to send my kids to this school. What am I doing? What am I doing with my kids?
Yeah.
There were two girls in particular whose stories were highlighted out of that school. One of them was Anuradha, who you've spoken a bit about, and the other one, her name was
Rashmi.
Rashmi, who only spoke Hindi.
That's right. Yeah.
And hers was a really interesting. Maybe you could just share a little bit about her.
Yeah. So she was the girl that was to be married off with her the 3 sisters together. And what happened was it was all set. I mean, the date was set for the marriage and everything. And then the father got pressure from the school, and in the end,
I think even the law was brought in at some point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Ultimately, the final thing that stopped the marriage was the police. They had to get the police involved because in India, actually, the law is 18 for a girl to get married. But I mean, there was in the night school, for example, the girl Sanjana told us that in Rajasthan has the highest rate of child marriages, and 10 to 14 is the normal, well, very common age for girls to get married. So yeah, her marriage got stopped, and we spoke to her father, and as you say, we sort of understood his thing, and she was able to stay in school. And one of the things she said, which was also quite kind of insightful, she said, I'm scared about getting married because I have no idea what the in-laws are going to be like.
Yeah.
So even if the family that she's in is supportive, which it isn't always, then you have this, it's like almost like spinning a dice kind of, you don't know what you're going to get.
There was, the story of Anuradha was like, wow, she's so powerful. This girl, this woman, she's going to be a very powerful woman, and she's going to find her way in life. And with Rashmi, is it? You could also see she had an inner strength, and she was a very special person. And it was a positive story. She did kind of break free, but at the same time, you also felt with her it's a little bit ominous, like, because I think at one point they said, well, what if at any point if her grades don't stay up or anything like that, then they're just going to turn it back again.
Yeah. And so her dad said, I said, well, when it comes time for her to get married, who will make the decision? Will she make a decision? Will you make the decision, or will you make it together? And he said, I will make the decision. And he said, and it's very much, like she's staying in school, but unless she's doing good, then that's it. And this really sad thing is in COVID, millions of underage girls have got married so it's set things back a lot for girls because, first of all, marriages were allowed to take place with 10 or 15 people. So that meant very low cost. And also...
So it was seen like, hey, now's the
time. It's a good time to marry.
Get them married quick.
Right.
And also very little scrutiny, right? Because it's not so much meetings and whatever. So yeah, unfortunately, it's been a really bad time.
So a real theme, and as Raghunath brought up in the beginning of the show, and you clearly articulate a couple times in the show, and maybe to me in the role that I play in my service, I also, its relevance to me. Yeah, its relevance was really on this level is the value of tradition on one side of the scale, and then on the other side of the scale, the difficulties in applying tradition to degrees where something that was designed out of compassion, something designed to bring out the best in people, can become a vehicle of cruelty or bring out the darker sides of people. And that is, that's something that all societies, likely struggle with in different ways. And I was thinking about that, because really while I'm watching that film, I'm thinking my connection to India is so deep, and my life is very much informed by the ancient yogic texts that this tradition has grown out of. At the same time, looking at it, and I have, I have so much appreciation for that tradition and that culture and those texts. But at the same time, I'm sitting here watching it, and I can't deny that it's sometimes, even with good intention, it's being implied in ways that become crushing practically, to the human spirit. What to speak of like the spirit of devotion, which all this tradition is really meant to foster.
Yeah, and I think the thing is if we remember why we were attracted to these things in the first place, is because we felt that they were uplifting, that they were inspiring, that they were, like you say, invoking of, love and devotion and compassion and connection and all of these things. So, the challenge comes when if those things, let's say, don't continue to be there, are we attached to tradition for tradition's sake?
Right.
Just because it's tradition? Well, in one sense, we say, well, I don't care what it is or what it's called or where it comes from. If it's not fulfilling on those things, then who cares, right? But the thing is that I think it's true that these things are there in every culture, but I think that they're particularly strong in India because there's a sense that that tradition is linked with that these are on things that you can't question because they're things of God.
Right.
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 And that's when it gets messy because,
it's almost like we have these massive task ahead of us to go in, and I think that's what we're doing with Wisdom of the Sages, or trying to do.
Yeah.
And what you're doing with this film is we have to go into the mine and extract what's gold.
Yeah.
And then walk away from the mine, because it's very confusing, and we got to go right to the essence. And there's a lot of people out there, especially in the yoga community, who want to say, you got to get rid of all tradition. And it's
Right.
and we see the value of tradition, but it has to be balanced. And this is sort of like, it takes expert, like a gold miner. You got to understand what's the real gold, what's the fool's gold, what is the real wealth here, and how can we take that out, apply it in a modern context, in a contemporary context, and make it useful. So it's not, I was going to say crippling. I'm not going to say that. It's not, that's our new no word. We're going to it's not damaging. It's uplifting, and it's inspiring, because the teachings itself are uplifting and inspiring. And there's a reason those traditions existed in the first place. And it wasn't to break your spirit. It was to enhance your spirit. And
I love what you guys are doing with Wisdom of the Sages. When I do stuff, even, a couple of times a week, it's pretty exhausting. You guys are doing it every day. You've got this great community of people, and you really, genuinely, I mean it, like you are doing just that, what you just said. And I think it's super valuable, because otherwise, people can get lost or discouraged or whatever when trying to understand some of these things. So, it's great.
Well, our show it's a show that's based on Srimad Bhagavatam, right? We read Srimad Bhagavatam every day together. And that's, that's the Puranas, and that's, connected to the Vedas, which are the source of this tradition. The stories that play out in the Puranas inform that tradition. But there's one point that I wanted to highlight that I think will be, so therefore this is particularly relevant to our listeners, when we approach this question of tradition and how it's applied. And it's something, just having watched your film last night, and then I was thinking about more this morning. And that is that our tradition, our lineage, sees the Srimad Bhagavatam as not just a valuable sacred text, but as the culmination of all of the sacred texts. So if there's any misunderstanding, it's meant to be clarified in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so the Srimad Bhagavatam is like the pinnacle of the yogic texts, the Vedic texts. And the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the story of Krishna's life, is the pinnacle of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so so the great sage Vyasa, as he's composing Bhagavatam, and as he's writing that 10th canto, he's in his mind, and out of the compassion of his heart, he's trying to really help us understand it all. And he sews right into that 10th canto a very interesting story of the comparison of these very traditional priests, the Yagnik Brahmanas, right? These are men that are completely rooted in tradition, and they're compared with their wives. And very briefly, what happens is Krishna sends his friends to ask the Yagnik Brahmins for some food. We've been sent by Krishna. He's hungry, and you've offered all this food as part of your sacrifice, and we're wondering, could we take some to bring back to Krishna? And they've become almost hardened. Their hearts have become hardened through a feeling of superiority that's grown out of their training and expertise in ritual, and the depth of their practice of this tradition. So they're refused. And they come back disappointed to Krishna, and Krishna says, "Oh, don't feel down. That's okay, no problem. But actually, why don't you go to the wives of those brahmanas and ask them the same thing?" And we see that when they go to the wives, their immediate response is with soft hearts, full of devotion. They say, "Oh, of course." They cook, they run with them to serve Krishna, and they're glorified. And so, but what's interesting is like, if anyone's like the not exactly the villain, but like, the ones that got it all wrong are the husbands, are the Yagnik Brahmanas, right? But we have to hand it to them because they had what a lot of us in the world don't have right now, is the ability to look at themselves and be self-critical and become determined to change. And so if you look at the words of these men, these Yagnik Brahmanas, again, sewn into this, the pinnacle of all the yoga teachings, I just want to pull it out a little bit, because after they see what happens, they get it. They said, we missed the whole point. Our tradition, we were so absorbed in our tradition that it didn't actually lead to where it's supposed to go. We were just absorbed in the tradition for its own sake, like you mentioned earlier, and we missed the point of it all. So this is what they say. They say, in strong language, they say, Dik janmanas trivird, to hell with our traditional rites of passage. They say, Dig vratam, to hell with our vows, to hell with our extensive knowledge, to hell with our aristocratic lineage, to hell with our ritualistic expertise. He says these are all condemned because we became inimical to what is transcendental, right? It's like it just developed pride in us. We were deep in the tradition, but it didn't actually lead to where it was supposed to lead. It needs to be reconsidered.
Tradition is meant to serve love.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And they see that love in their own. They say we have been bewildered about our own self-interest. And then they say this. They say, "Aho, pasyata." Just see these women, right? Just take a look at our wives. They've never undergone all of these purificatory rites of passage that we've gone through. They haven't lived as monks in the ashrams of their gurus. They haven't done all the austerities that we've done. They haven't done all like the speculative kind of studies that we've engaged in. They haven't followed all the formalities and the pious rituals that we've done. Nevertheless, and they say, nevertheless, they develop this deep love for God. And they say of themselves, we have no bhakti, although we've gone through all these rituals. So it's really so, all of that tradition is provided, but then we're given this really clear instruction, that we all have to meditate on in terms of important issues like how women are treated in society, but and as well as in so many other forums, this idea that never lose a sight of where the purpose of the tradition, what it's supposed to lead to. And if we see that it's not leading there, it's not taboo to reconsider it. It's actually, it must be reconsidered.
It's essential, yeah.
Yeah. So that comes out so well in your film. You illustrate very clearly that it's not that anyone's a villain here, but societies are stuck in cycles, afraid to question them when it's obvious that they need to be questioned. Right? So, would you please, if you'd like to share something?
No, I just said it's powerful. It's great to quote that from the Bhagavatam to kind of orient us back to as you say, to see that it's right there in the Bhagavatam, the same point. I read a quote the other day, and it's true in our own families, in our own communities, in our own societies. It said that the cycles of, I think the word they used was like trauma, they will repeat themselves again and again and again until somebody decides to heal themselves. So that can be, and that's a key important point for me when people watch the film, or my wish, if you like, is that we don't externalize it and think of it as something somewhere else, but actually think about how do these issues, so rather internalize it, a bit like the Yogic Brahmanas, and think about, well, how, if at all, how are these issues relevant to my own life, and what can I do to, either change myself or to be more aware of these things in my sphere of influence. And I think that's how slowly, if lots of people do that in different ways, that's how that invisible thing we were talking about, that system, that structure, will change. Otherwise, where do you start?
Right.
But you can start with yourself.
Well, one way people can start is by seeing the film Road to Vrindavan. So maybe you can share with us, the forums that it's available in right now.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I guess I think I've put a link in already. We can put another link in the chat if you're on this Zoom call.
A lot of people don't
One out of 100
listen to this that are not on Zoom. So maybe just say it.
Yeah. I was gonna say both, but if you are on the Zoom call, you can check that link. It'll take you directly. For anyone who's listening who's not here right now, basically just go to road2vrindavan.com. Road2vrindavan.com. And Vrindavan is kind of quite, as it sounds, Vrindavan. And there's a whole bunch of screenings that are on there, and there will continue to be screenings throughout the whole of 2021. But if you're listening to it right kind of shortly after this has been out, then go to the one which says UK Premiere. But you can watch it anywhere in the world.
Okay. And people can also kind of host filmings of it, is that right?
Yeah, so if you happen to have a community or a network or your company or your organization and you'd like to do what we call a partnership screening, then on that same platform, you'll see if you go to the link I just mentioned, we can set up a screening which is bespoke for your audience. We can brand it with your community or your network or your organization, and then we can invite your audience, and then we can even have a Q&A and a panel afterwards and all kinds of things. So it makes it a bit more personal for your community. Yeah.
And how's the film doing so far?
Yeah, really good. We've been selected for 5 international film festivals, which is awesome. And then we've done about 6 or 7 partnership screenings so far. We're hoping to do about 100. But the real thing is, like, people are contacting us, like, deeply moved, relating it to their own lives, sharing stories about how they could see the similarities. And that's, to be honest, the most rewarding part of it.
Beautiful.
Super cool.
And what's next for Be Inspired Films?
So hopefully this will be the first of many feature documentaries. We have been doing a lot of, somehow or other, we've started doing a lot of work with gender. It's funny how one thing leads to another. We just put on a huge global summit for Gender Smart Investing Summit, which brought all the biggest investors in the world together to looking at this through a gender lens. We just did TED Talks at TEDx London, which was all focused on women, which was at Abbey Road Studios. Anybody who knows the Beatles will know Abbey Road Studios is where they've recorded a lot of stuff. So that was pretty fun. But yeah, alongside the stuff that pays the bills, which is working with the organizations, I'd like to do more of these big kind of documentaries on social issues.
Is it exhausting to produce a film like this and to get it out there and follow up with it?
Yeah, independent film is a different beast than, blockbuster type stuff where it's funded. Like, I mean, I spent most of the money I spent in the beginning was my own. And then I fortunately got some people to help support it. But I've not personally taken any money for it. And it's taken me about 4 years. So yeah, it's been a huge endeavor. But like I said, to be honest with you, it has been incredibly transformational in my own life. And so I'm incredibly grateful for it.
That's great. And, I thought we could also take this as an opportunity. Raghunath and I, we've been speaking with, we haven't reached out yet, but we plan to reach out to Rupa Raghunath, who runs the Sandipani Muni School in Vrindavan, and hopefully we can get him on the show. Yeah. But I think that's another place where our listeners can check out, online, right? Is it Sandipani Muni?
I think it's FFLV. So Food for Life Vrindavan is the school comes underneath that umbrella. So if you want to go fflv.org, I think it is, and it's worth checking out. It's worth visiting. If you're going to go to Vrindavan for any reason, you should definitely visit it. It's an incredible experience. While we have your listeners here, I should ask if anybody is somehow connected into some of the streaming platforms or any of these places that we could get a bigger home for this film, then please do drop me a line.
To reach out to you, and they can do that by?
They can do that through the contact form on the Road to Vrindavan website, or they can get me at Ravinol, Ravinol, at beinspiredfilms.com.
Fantastic. Ravanel, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
It's been a pleasure.
Congratulations on the film. It's a great service you're doing, and we really encourage everyone to check it out.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Find the essence. That's the theme today, I think.
All right, it's takeaway.
Value the tradition, but find the essence, or else you're going to get distracted. And so Mara's gone Wednesday.
Mara, can't believe it. How are we going to do this?
She's got to go. She's going to find herself.
Okay, all right.
Pilgrimage herself.
Rago, do you want to tell the Facebook listeners how they can join Zoom?
Facebook listeners, if everybody listening on Facebook today, we do this every day, 7 days a week. You can join us at Zoom, where we have a little community of people. They have about hundreds plus people a day watching us live. It's fun. We hang out with each other. We know each other by face, by name. You can join us for free. All you need is secret codes to get in. To get those secretive codes, you have to write Mara at wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com. Not only that, then you can also write her and ask questions, because Saturday's question day. If you have any questions on your spiritual journey, write them in. Me and Kaustubha try our best to answer those questions. That's the best way. There's so many different ways people write nowadays. Do it through the email address. That way we keep it organized. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. If there's something you heard today that you like, you write it down, you take a snapshot on it, you post it, you tag us. We re-tag you and put it out there. Sending out little hunks and nuggets of, what do we call it? Nuggets of wisdom? Wisdom nuggets?
Yeah. Wisdom nuggets.
Wisdom nuggets today. It could affect somebody's heart. It could change the trajectory of their life. Thanks, everybody. And Ravinol, I don't know if you know or not, but this is what we do now. Now we clap and dance. Do you know about that?
I was hoping that was what was going to happen.
That's part of it. And
I was getting into the music. I was feeling it.
Mara's got the dance cam, so you're going to lead it.